I'm genuinely humbled. I thank everyone in the panel who judged these books for this award. Seeing these other books on the screen and realizing that mine was the one chosen for this prize makes me realize, well, I've served on panels before. I've been a judge. I've seen how the sausage is made, so to speak, and I know how difficult the process is. I would like to congratulate everyone else who was nominated. I was looking through the list of all the books that were considered, and lo and behold, I found 5 by colleagues whose work I not only admire, but whose work has influenced mine. I'm genuinely humbled. And I also want to say, Alden, it's a good day for Chicago, because I went to Senn High School on the north side, and I wasn't supposed to be here either, given the trajectory. Senn High School on the north side of Chicago was a unique school back in the 1960s. Our principal had a map on the wall of the world with pins on it. And the only 2 continents without pins were Australia and Antarctica. And we used to joke that our foreign exchange student was a wasp from Ohio. So how did I end up writing about the Reformation, and what's the meaning of this historical period? What's the meaning of history? And what is my book all about? Well, the period known as the Reformation, so roughly the dates on my book, 1450 to about 1700. It's a period of immense change. My argument in this book is that we cannot understand who we are and where we are without understanding this pivotal change in Western history, in human history. The fact that we're all in this room, that we can communicate freely, that we can share ideas, that we can disagree and not kill each other for disagreeing, begins in this period. To understand how in the West people became tolerant of each other, and to understand that to gain that tolerance, to gain the freedoms that we enjoy now, humanity had to go through a very painful period. It's a very painful period of the Reformations, both Catholic and Protestant. But we can learn a lot from understanding that gaining freedom, gaining tolerance is never easy. And that there are many heroes who are willing to give their lives for the development of freedom and tolerance. How did I get interested in all this? Well, I lived through a revolution. I was born in Cuba, came to the US without my parents in 1962. I may be the only living historian of this period who has seen religious images smashed. Just 2 blocks from my house, men with a sledgehammer, bang, 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 knocking the religious images off the school run by the Ursuline sisters. It made an impression on me. And then for a while there in Miami, I was living in a home for juvenile delinquents. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because that was the only place they could put me. And there was a tiny little dinky branch of the Miami Public Library where my brother and I sought refuge every night when it was open. And I became hooked on history. Suddenly, the past to me became more interesting than the present. The past was a place in which to escape. The past was a place where I could understand why I was in that dinky library in a home for juvenile delinquents. And before too long, I exhausted the children's section, and they allowed me to check out the adult books in history. Those little branch libraries, they can save lives. They saved mine. Right? The past is what we have as our identity. Anyone who develops amnesia, who loses their memory, basically loses their life. Why is the past so important? Why is history important? Because, as the Spanish philosopher who ended up in the United States, George Santayana, said, those who don't know the past are doomed to repeat it. It's our memory. And a period of the reformations. And why the plural? Reformations with an S at the end. Because there were various reformations. There were multiple reformations. Of course, it all began with Martin Luther in 1517, and this year we're celebrating the 500th anniversary, and you're all going to get sick of hearing about the anniversary of the Reformation. But there ended up being multiple reformations. The Protestants, divided into subgroups, and the Catholics. Everyone was into reforming, into changing, and everyone wanted to change life for the better. That's what reformers do. Some reformers think that making life better means taking over and telling everyone else what to do. That's not real reforming, but in this period you have all these different sorts of people wanting to change the world and to make it better. And lo and behold, about certainly 200 years after it all began in 1517, by 1717, principles of freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom to dialogue, freedom to exchange ideas, had gained a very firm foothold among the elites who set the tone for everyone else. And in places like Holland, not just the elites, people got along. I know of one town in southern Germany where actually Lutherans and Catholics shared the same church building. And no elites were telling them to do this. This was from the bottom up. But to cut to the chase, reformations, plural, not just the past, continues today. One thing I've learned, not just by being a refugee, because that's what I am, I actually had the status of refugee until I was in college. Being a refugee, fleeing from one of the most oppressive places on earth, a place that is still to this day, right now, as we're speaking, as I'm speaking and you're listening, one of the most repressive governments on earth that has only become worse since the so-called normalization circus was put into place in late 2014. Freedom is very fragile. Freedom of speech is very fragile. Freedom to exchange ideas calmly, rationally, allowing the other to speak with full dignity is very fragile, immensely fragile. The era of the Reformations was an era where everything was polarized. There was black and white, and God help anyone who was in the gray area. You had to choose sides. End result is a lot of suffering for several generations before people realize, look, it's better to speak freely and accept each other for what we are. Freedom is fragile. But books. There's nothing that dictators fear more than freedom of expression. There's nothing that dictators fear more than books. This association, the authors and the editors, all deserve medals for keeping this going. All my books, including this one, are banned in Cuba. In Cuba, I'm an enemy of the state, and I cannot return. I could return, but it's risky, immensely risky. So, let's hang on to our freedom. Let's hang on to it. Let's keep publishing books. Let's keep publishing books that annoy people, that anger people, on all bands of the spectrum. This is the thing about, lately refugees are on everybody's mind. Refugees are people who are fleeing repression. When it comes to refugees, yes, sometimes the left or right is involved. Are these people fleeing a rightist regime, or are they fleeing a leftist regime, or something else? A refugee is a refugee. A refugee is someone who's looking for peace, tranquility, and in our century, freedom. Books. Books can help enlighten everyone to the fact that the freedom that refugees seek is in fact very fragile, immensely fragile. But in closing, I just want to thank my wife, Jane, for putting up with a project that took 17 years from start to finish. All those days and nights holed up in my study with the sign inside my door warning me when I go out to the rest of the house, danger, high explosives. And I want to thank my editor, Christopher Rogers, and I want to thank the chief editor at Yale Press, John Donatich, for all their support, for the patience they had for a book that was first proposed in 1999. And I finally brought to completion just last year. But I'm honored and humbled, and I thank everyone involved in this process. Thank you.